is the vision of community and change happening.
Jay Bakker, a pesar de haber crecido en la opulencia y bajo las luces de la fama de sus padres Jim y Tammy Faye Bakker, dirigentes del famoso programa Praise the Lord, pasó su adolescencia involucrado con las drogas y el alcohol, lo que casi acabó con su vida. Hoy, a los 31 años de edad, Jay es un pastor dedicado a rescatar a aquellos que son rechazados o a los que debido a su estilo de vida y apariencia no encajan en una iglesia. En 1994, Jay Bakker fundó Revolution, un ministerio para predicar el cristianismo a punks y escatos en reuniones de oración en clubes nocturnos. Con sus brazos y torso cubiertos de tatuajes, una barba hipster y múltiples piercings, Bakker trabaja al grupo de contracultura con mensajes alternativos de Dios.
Bienvenidos a un programa especial, un programa adicional, en diálogos o dialogando con las suelas ideas. Jim Bakker, el tema de hoy. Imagínese usted que de repente le toca nacer en Estados Unidos y que su padre es el teleevangelista más importante del mundo. Una persona que a través de la televisión ha logrado un proselitismo, ha logrado convertir a millones de personas a sus propias creencias. Una persona que habla de valores, de ética, es un predicador. Su esposa, es decir, la madre de usted, la esposa de su padre, también una mujer muy famosa, muy relevante. Tanta gente se volvió adscrita a los valores y a la palabra de su padre, que bueno, él ha hecho mucho dinero. Tiene hoteles, tiene centros de convenciones, tiene parques recreativos, del nivel de Disneylandia. Y de repente este gran teleevangelista que se llama Bob Bakker, resulta que Robert, primero lo acusan de que todos sus valores es un fraude y que tiene una doble moral y que realmente ha hostigado y ha abusado sexualmente de mujeres. Y posteriormente, para hacer todo esto más dramático y que la realidad supere por mucho a las telenovelas, el señor Bakker lo acusan de fraude. Usted, como el hijo del señor Bakker, lo primero que le pasa es decir todo fue una mentira y no creo todo lo que pensé toda mi vida. Y es más, Dios, te tengo coraje. Sentencian a su padre por 45 años de prisión y usted, sintiendo lealtad a su sangre, a su gen, a su familia, a su padre, le escribe al presidente de Estados Unidos, al vicepresidente, a todo el mundo, y logra de alguna otra manera, a través de cabildeo, influencias y gran trabajo, no solo salir con Larry King, y en CBS, y en ABC, NBC, y en una de las grandes cadenas, no solamente norteamericanas del mundo, sino rusas y europeas. Y logra de alguna otra manera que su padre no sea culpado por 45 años y sentenciado tantos años a prisión, sino solo por 5. Después de esa aventura o rompimiento con la fe, entra en un estado de shock y posteriormente usted dice, ¿saben qué? Yo estaba equivocado. Y vuelvo a no creer lo que no pensaba y creo yo una propia religión. Una religión donde yo soy diferente, pero también es protestante, donde también creo en un solo Dios y donde ahora la misa será en bares y en distintos lugares. Y a partir de allí se genera un movimiento con cientos de miles de fieles, probablemente millones, la mayoría jóvenes. Muchos de ellos reconocen que usted, que es el gran predicador, vivió todos estos traumas, fue víctima de circunstancias, fue alcohólico y sufrió muchísimas cosas. En pocas palabras, usted es diferente. Y para representarlo y lograr el símbolo de una manera más íntegra, se llena de tatuajes, de aretes y de formas representativas que lo hacen parecer ser excluido. Ese es nuestro invitado el día de hoy, Jim Bakker. It's really an honor to have this interview with you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's great to be here.
With your own words, who are you?
Well,
what's your name? What have you studied? What's your story?
Well, my name's Jay Bakker, and I grew up under one of the biggest churches in the country until I was 11 years old in 1987 when it all fell apart. And my mom and dad are Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker, and they are really huge televangelists here in America, and they also had a huge church that also had hotels and a water park and all sorts of stuff.
Could you tell us a little bit, because that's it. What kind of hotels or do they still have them?
No, but
Not
people
anymore.
would come from all over the world to visit, and it was like a Christian retreat. And it was Disneyland, Disney World, and then Heritage USA. So it was the third largest visited retreat center
Wow.
in all of America. And in 1987, my parents had a scandal, and my dad trusted a pastor to take the church over for him, but instead the pastor took it and kind of ran it into the ground. Also, my father spent 5 years in prison. Originally got a 45-year sentence, but luckily got down to 5 years for mail fraud and wire fraud, which was unheard of at the time, but the judge was not a big fan of my dad.
You actually do a lot to reduce that sentence, is that right? You
Yes.
help your father. Could
Yeah,
you?
I worked
How
really
old were
hard,
you
and
at that
I
time?
was 15, 16 years old, writing letters every day, asking
That's
people to
incredible.
help my dad come home and shorten his sentence. I mean, I wrote the president, the vice president, called every preacher, probably half the preachers in the world that my dad knew, and eventually got his sentence reduced down to 5 years. So.
How many members were in your father's church before everything happened?
Oh, I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Yes.
I mean, it was probably
The biggest in.
in maybe even in million. I mean, thousands and thousands and
Yes.
thousands, because they were also all over the world because they broadcasted live on television 6 days a week.
Now you have your own organization.
Yes.
Now we will get into that.
Okay.
What happened to you in terms of believing? I mean, you believe a lot in God before that, during that time. It have changed your perspective about religion and God
Oh, well,
since the
definitely.
SCAP, before, after? Could you tell us?
Well, a lot of what I was going through is a lot of growing up. I thought God might be an angry, mean God, you know, and so I ignored God through my teenage years for the most part. Then around 19, I kind of felt called to the ministry, and I went out to Arizona and started a revolution with 3 of my really close friends. Well, we just saw a need.
That's an interesting thing.
I mean, I actually went up there to try to just get my life together, and then I met these folks, and we just saw this need of these kids who were being left out of church, a lot of the goth kids and skateboarders and stuff like that. So then we started, it was, I believe, we came up with the idea in 93 and started in 94, and spent a year doing that, but I was still very much with the idea that God was judgmental and a condemning God. And so after about 8, 9 months, I left the ministry. And I just decided that I didn't want to serve God anymore. And I felt like God was real and that I was probably destined for hell. But I said, I don't care. I'm just going to live the best life I can. And it was through that where I met some folks, where I met a friend. Through that I left. When I left Arizona, I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and met with a friend of mine named D.E. Polk. And I told him how I was feeling, and he said I was full of it. And he said I was trying to earn salvation, and that salvation was free. And for some way, at first I didn't believe him, but he was my roommate, so we would talk about it a lot, and eventually it just took off. And I started reading the Bible for my own. And when I started understanding what the Bible really said, I was just amazed how far away people have gotten in the States from the Bible. But I was also amazed of how amazing God's love really was, and how much His grace was really just there, and it didn't matter what I did or who I was, that God loved me just the way I was. And that's what changed my life. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about, because like for a business case, you know, for Harvard Business School, like how everything started, how many people it's now with you, and the most important thing, what makes your church, your organization different to other churches?
Well,
there are many questions.
yes,
I'm
there's
sorry.
many questions,
We
but
could start with.
But over
last
time,
one.
I mean, the church grew and it shrunk and it grew. We actually have a church in Atlanta now. We have a church in Charlotte, and then I pastor the church here in Brooklyn. How it's different from other churches, I guess, is, well, one, we meet in a bar. which
You
is
meet in a bar.
yes, and which is, you know, not as acceptable here in the States as it is in some places outside, like especially in Europe and such. We meet in a bar. We don't have music. People come in. I talk for about 30, 45 minutes. Then we usually hang out afterwards. I mean, it's really simple, but it's just a message of love and hope.
Much more fraternal.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we talk about a lot of the hard situations too. Also, one of the things is, for me personally, a big conviction for me has been the civil rights of gay and lesbian and transgender people. And so I work a lot on that, and also, you know, my conviction is that it's not a sin, and I've taken a lot of flack for that over the past few years, but it's worth it. It's worth fighting for people, especially minorities who are being rejected and hurt and discriminated against. So our church does a lot of different things, and
what does it mean for you personally, like the way you have your tattoos and the rings, and it has like a special symbolic meaning in relation with what you profess?
Well, I mean, some of my tattoos do, but I mean, for most part, I liked tattoos. I grew up in kind of the punk rock scene, and
Okay.
I just got them over the years, and I still like them, and I don't regret them, and I still get them.
And if you regret them, it's too late. No?
Yeah, it's
Because-
too late, yeah. But, you know, I like having my tattoos. It's not really trying to make a bold statement. Sometimes it gets your foot in the door, other times it hinders it, you know.
Okay, sure.
But it's just a part of who I am, and I believe in being an individual. And I mean, that's how my mom raised me, is to be who God created me to be, and that's who I am. I just want to be true to what I feel called to. And if people don't accept that, then, you know, that's too bad.
What could be your biggest and most important message that you most of the time try to repeat after what you have lived and what you have learned through the Bible? And
Love people, you know, show compassion to all people, not just your friends. Learn how to love and learn how to show compassion. You'll grow from that, because it's not easy to love and show compassion to people.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really my main focus and my main message is that's the example Christ set for us. And that's the example I'm trying to follow, is to include people, not exclude them. Hopefully see the church become a much better, safer place, a much more tolerant, loving place. And that's part of my mission and part of what I feel called to do.
Do you have like a main idea of something that you believed before that it's like a good sample that don't believe everything you think, that you don't think like that anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up thinking God was this angry God keeping a record, and that we had to constantly ask for forgiveness, and that you could lose your salvation and things like that. I don't believe that anymore. You know, I also don't believe that God is this exclusive God. I don't think that every other religion is going
Do you
to
believe
hell.
in hell?
I don't know. That's something that I'm working on right now.
That's a nice a person that is sincere. I don't know, un pastor que te diga eso. That's interesting. Do you believe in other lives?
Yeah, I do believe in life after death. I mean, I believe in heaven. I believe that God loves us so much, and God's grace is so much bigger than I can imagine. So I trust God. And I don't think even the ideas that I have of hell, I don't think it's the place that people make it out to be. I don't think it's fiery furnace and torture.
Guiltness versus responsibility. You have been sharing and you have been fighting against a lot of stereotypes in terms of sexual preferences, in terms of religion preference. You always have been, since you start all this revolutionary church, defending on behalf of the minorities and the people that they don't have exactly a voice, and having a voice with you. But sometimes some people could, I don't know, make felonies or do things they actually bother another person or harm another person. How do you deal with that when they come to your church?
Well, you know, I try to love them as I would love myself, you know, and so when I would want someone to talk to me and sit down with me compassionately, but if I was hurting someone else's life, or sternly even, you know, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and it took people saying, you're throwing your life away, and it took tough love, and so sometimes that's necessary, to help a person maybe wake up and see what they're doing.
Why should they listen to you? What do you have to tell them that they really need to be there?
Well, I don't know why anybody should listen to me, but hopefully they'll listen to me for the fact that I think we miss out on the grace and love of God and faiths and interfaith and people working together as a community, you know, even those without faith. I think that's one of the things that's really important, you know, even with, you know, you see the new atheism and things like that, is like, I don't think we can count each other out. I think we have to work together as a community to make this world a better place, because there's a lot of people dying, a lot of people being killed all over the world. And I think if we could start communicating with one another and trying to reach for mankind, a better for mankind, and for our family, I mean for our children and our children's children.
I think you mentioned, well, now that the new atheism have emerged very strongly in Europe and in America, how do you read them? How do you understand them? I mean, and also, how can you communicate, for example, with a group of people that, for them, communication is just to forget that you exist? It's like they don't have ears for whatever you say.
Well, and when people don't want to hear what you have to say, I mean, you're kind of stuck. And I think that's what makes me a little bit nervous about some of that. You know, the new atheists, it seems very fundamental, like fundamentalists. Just like fundamentalist Christians, you know what I mean? They get to a point where they don't want to hear, you're not there, you don't exist, and you believe in unicorns, basically, is what they think. So I think what we have to do is be willing to put those things aside. I mean, I hope more people in the new atheists, I hope all fundamentalists will put things aside and start conversation. And I've been trying to do that for the past few weeks. I've been going to different churches all over the country, trying to meet with these pastors and bringing gay and lesbian and transgender families with us to try to meet together and have a conversation. And some people don't want the conversation. Some people open their doors, but once you get down to the conversation, they put up a wall. And then there's other people who agree to disagree and have really great conversations. And that's what I hope to see.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah.
That's important. Do you still get along with your family, with your father, your mother?
Well, my mother passed away a year ago.
I'm sorry.
But she was one of my best friends up until, you know, the day she died. And I still talk to my dad, and my dad's been very supportive of the work that I do.
It's because I just read a book by Dan Hammer named The God Gene, which it's not exactly that your father passed the genes, but that there is like a need to believe.
Yeah.
And that some people believe in the believers, but when I see you and I see some friends of mine, there is also like a gene of leadership, or I don't know if you learned it from your father, but I mean, there is something. I don't know what do you think about.
You learn it from making a lot of mistakes, and that's what I did. Is I made a lot of mistakes and drove a lot of people crazy, and tried to learn from those mistakes and not make them again.
That's right. Really, thank you very much for sharing and we're expecting to see you in Puebla. And,
you will.
And thank you very much. ¿Usted qué piensa? ¿Qué piensa sobre lo que aquí se pensó? En mi caso particular, pues esto me remite a que muchas personas, su medio es el mensaje, su forma es el fondo. No es tanto lo que dicen, sino lo que representan independientemente de lo que digan. Ese fue el caso de la entrevista de hoy. A mí en lo personal lo que más me provocó es de quién viene lo que se dice, más lo que se dice de quién viene. Pero lo importante al final de cuentas es lo que usted piensa. ¿Y para qué sirven las ideas? Yo siempre he sido un devoto en el cual cree que la razón de que unos países son ricos y otros son pobres es que se conjugan ideas, innovación, junto a riesgo y capital de riesgo, y que bajo instituciones que generan confianza, contratos que generan confianza, uno puede realmente hacer que un país sea más rico y uno más pobre. ¿Qué ideas del señor Bakker, del joven Bakker, lo hacen pensar que a lo mejor el reconocimiento de la diversidad cultural, en la multiculturalidad, en la tolerancia a lo diferente, podría hacer de cualquier país un país más próspero? Bakker estará con nosotros en Puebla del 6 al 8 de noviembre. Esto fue un programa más hecho para ustedes en Proyecto 40, construyendo un México libre a través de la diversidad de las opiniones, hoy aquí con ustedes.
La Ciudad de las Ideas, un festival sin precedentes, agradece el apoyo a las siguientes empresas socialmente responsables.